Hi folks, in this particular assignment you're going to be creating a little math quizzing utility. If I just run this little video showing you what it's doing, it'll be pretty self-evident to you what you need to code. And here you have, a multiplication, or well, it's addition, it can be multiplication, whatever you want. And the user is prompted to enter answers, and if they enter the right answer, a green message comes up. And then a new problem arises, and if they enter the wrong answer, a red message comes up. Uh, and if they keep entering wrong answers, new wrong messages appear. Uh, and finally, when they get the right answer, a green message appears briefly before a new multiplication or addition problem emerges. Um, so that's the basic quizzing thing that you're going to be creating. Uh, and uh, the things that you'll learn in creating this particular assignment is you'll learn the focus method, so that when the page loads, the cursor is in that submission button where you enter the answer, where the user is prompted to enter the answer. You'll learn the math.round method. That works kind of similar to, not similar, you're going to be creating these random equations, and as you may remember with math.random, uh, you were creating numbers between 0 and zero point 0.9. Well, you need to use math.round to turn those numbers into actual integers. The window.setTimeout method, as you may have noticed, there's a slight delay when the message is displayed before the new equation actually appears. So you need to be able to use the set timeout to be able to delay the appearance of a new equation. Remember that there were green messages and red messages that appeared? Well, we're going to actually, in a previous assignment in the rock, paper, scissors, we styled our text just using HTML and inserting classes in our HTML, and then uh, coding the appropriate CSS. Well, here we're actually going to do it dynamically using JavaScript. And then finally, down here, the event.keyCode allows you to, it's a new kind of event which allows the code to be listening to when you actually enter the key, when you click on the enter key rather than clicking just on the submit button. So let's get ahead and to sort of teach all of this to you, instead of coding the multiplication thing from hand, I've created this little quizzing um, little application similar to it's a riddle. So what happens is when the page loads, it presents a riddle to the user, and the user then can respond with something. Let's respond with something nonsensical like AAA. It says wrong, try again. When you figure out what the riddle is, the answer to the riddle is, in this case it's man, it presents a green message to you, and then after a 3-second delay, it loads a new riddle to you. And then you can respond to that riddle. Let's again respond to something nonsensical. Wrong, try again. Then when you actually answer it correctly, it'll show a green message for 3 seconds or so, and then load another riddle. In this case, it was the original riddle. There's only 2 riddles in this application. So solved, loading new riddle, and it loads it. Okay, so how do we go about coding this? Let's go here, and let's first of all create the HTML. So first we have a message at the top with the riddle in it. So we'll just make this a div field and give it an ID of riddle. And we'll put riddle here. just for the time being as a stub. We should probably get rid of that eventually. And then we'll have an input field where we're going to be looking for user's input and or the user's answer. So we'll call it answer. And then we have the message down below, which tells the user whether they got the riddle, their answer right or wrong. So we'll call this just message. And then a submit button. And we'll just call it solve it. Okay. And let's give it some styling. And so I'm not really teaching you CSS here, so I'll just drop this in just to hurry things along. There's our CSS. Now let's start to actually code the JavaScript here. Scrunch this up. Let's first add the riddles. And then we're just going to make these some global variables. Just copying and pasting those in. Now, if we were doing a more ambitious application here, I would probably be sticking all of these into an array and actually putting the answers into the riddle and the answer to the riddle in an object. But I haven't even shown you either arrays or objects yet. There's enough to learn without looking at that stuff now. So we're doing something a bit more rudimentary so that we can focus on other competencies. So the first thing we want to do is load the riddle. We want the riddle to display when the page loads. Okay, we want one of these two riddles to display. So let's call a function. All right, function load riddle, camel case, of course, and here, I would probably also be running some kind of random number generator if I had a whole bunch of riddles. But here, all I'm trying to do is, if one riddle is displaying, make sure to show the other riddle so that there's some sort of alternation of the riddles. So we can do that pretty easily. So if here we're saying if the riddle in the actual here equals this riddle, then let's not show it. Let's show the other riddle. Else, let's actually show that riddle. So we can show it if indeed it's not showing that riddle. Otherwise, we want to show the first riddle, the second riddle rather. Just like so. And we're getting an error here, of course, because here, this should be second nature by now. This is a comparison operator when we want to actually give it an assignment operator. And let's see if this actually runs now. It's not going to actually. we have a function, but it's not loading when we wanted to. So we could, of course, take it out of the function. Let me just show you that. So and now it's actually running. It's actually loading. But there is an issue, a hidden issue here, because if we put this in the script tag, which is, the other place we could put this. Let's copy it here and run it again. We actually get an error in our console, and it's not actually displaying. And what it says is cannot read property inner HTML of null. So what it's trying to do is find the inner HTML of Riddle, okay, and then evaluate what's in there. But it can't actually find this. This is null, and the reason why it's null is because this script is running before the body of the HTML page is actually loaded. So that's why you always want to wrap your functions, wrap this kind of code. That if you have code that's actually calling the HTML, you need to make sure that it's actually executed after the HTML on the page is already loaded. So we can do that by putting our code back here. And now, interestingly enough, well, we've put it in a function here, but we need to actually execute that function because right now nothing's happening. So we can do that by going onload equals, so that's an event just like onClick, right? And here we call our method. What do you think that method is? Load riddle, right? And now now it's running. Okay. The assignment actually, so with that out of the way, the assignment now also asks you to make sure that the focus is on here automatically. Notice that we have to actually put it in here. You can try to run this particular statement, which is returning, the element. Well, actually, we want answer here. And then, and you can see now you got the focus. Alternatively, if you don't want to do it that way, you could also just use one of these new HTML5 attributes and put in autofocus here, which I think also works. And let's try that. That does not seem to be as helpful as doing it this way. Okay. Autofocus should work. It's probably good to put them both in just so that all contexts are covered. So let's leave it like that for right now. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is be able to evaluate the user's input. Right now, nothing happens. So let's attach an event to the button, onClick event. And actually, just eventually we're going to learn how to attach these onClick events dynamically through JavaScript, but right now we're just putting it in manually into the actual element. When I say eventually, it'll be a future assignment. And let's have this call a method, a function rather. And call it process input. Okay, so now let's evaluate what the actual input was that was put in by the user. And let's put that into a variable. So var answer equals, and this is and then we can call the input field, target the input field by this sort of classic get element by ID. And that input field is called answer. I apologize for the way everything's scrunched up here. You know, it's sort of a question of limited real estate when you're doing it with video. Answer dot, and here instead of inner HTML, this is key to remember. Your instinct might be to use inner HTML here, but in fact, in an input field, it's not inner. You don't access this stuff with inner HTML. You access it with the value property, like so. Okay, so we can just output that to console for a second here. And just check that it's working. So I'm getting an error. Let's save this and reload it and see whether it runs now. So yeah, okay. So that's a big gotcha there, okay? Because you might want to put inner HTML here. And then try to, but you get an error because it goes, well, it gives you just an error. There's no such thing as an inner HTML property, I think, for this. So you got to give it value. Okay. Okay. Give ourselves some more real estate here. So here we're going to go. We're going to see whether the answer is actually the correct answer or not, and we're going to infer that partly based on what the riddle is. So let's figure out what the riddle is here. We can do that by going again, document and this here we actually do use inner HTML because we're accessing a div, not an input. Now we have our riddle and our answer available for us to use. And now if we go if riddle equals rid1 and answer equals man, then we can say, again, we'll just do console log else if, here we can copy some stuff. it's just sort of elementary logic here. If riddle equals 2, right, and answer equals umbrella, again, we can say it's solved. Else not solved. And let's just test that code out. Save it. Save snapshot. And here we'll put in some code. Undefined. Getting an undefined error somewhere. Let's test a little bit more just to make sure it doesn't work with man. Also getting undefined. So we're getting some bug somewhere. Let's see where the undefined is. Now the console is being really cryptic in terms of, not giving us much information in terms of what what undefined is referring to. I'm thinking it's probably the process input function. Let's go back to our HTML. It says process input. Make sure our case is correct. It's looking right, Let's again save the snapshot, reload the page, try it again. Oh, so sometimes you just need to reload it. Not solved. 4 legs, man. Solved 1. Okay. So that's good. All right. Now instead of course outputting to console, we wanted to output to this little message down here, right, instead. So what do we need to do in order to make that happen? We have our little message down here, okay? So we can target that as message. So yes, so instead of outputting to the console, we wanted to output to this div with an ID of message. And we can do that by going here, and again, let's give ourselves real estate. Document. This auto run is real pain. Document get element by ID message. And not value here, right? Use inner HTML equals, and then we give it the solved. And eventually we're going to solved. And then again, here too. And here instead, we want wrong. Try again. Try it again. Okay. That doesn't work, but man should work. And now solved. Okay, good. Now the next thing we want to do is to actually style these with appropriate colors, right? And so in the previous assignment, we did that by inserting the actual HTML into or wrapping this HTML, this text in the appropriate HTML, and adding an appropriate ID, and then adding the ID and appropriate selector to the CSS, which works and works well enough, but there's a more concise way to do this rather than having to actually embed more HTML on your page. We can do that by going message.style.color equals, we could use single quotes, but just to follow green, and same here. And here we want red. And let's run it again. And now it's, you see, it's working. So the next thing we need to do is to, if it's solved, we need to reload another riddle, right? And how can we do that? Well, we can do this, right? We can load riddle. And this should work. So wrong, but if we enter man, now you get the new riddle. But the one problem here is it's working, yeah. So man, if we put an umbrella here, we'll get the original riddle, I think. The new riddle loads right away, and I want it to sort of sit there for a little while, kind of to delay, because you're going to need it to delay also on the multiplication submission that you're putting into. And we can do that using something called set timeout. And the set timeout syntax is like this: set and then it takes two parameters. Set timeout takes two parameters, which is the method that you want to call, load riddle, and then how many seconds you want it to delay before it actually calls the method or the function that you're trying to call. In this case, we'll give it 3,000 milliseconds or 3 seconds. Now you need to be careful here. If you actually put the parentheses in like this, then load riddle runs right away. You just want to make a reference to the function, not actually call the function by leaving the parentheses out like that. And let's do it this way too, down here. And run it all again. So now if we put in man solved, and then you can see that it delayed. So now we can add solved loading new riddle shortly. And here the same thing. Loading new riddle shortly. Okay. Okay, we are almost done with this. One thing, of course, is we probably want to get rid of this message, yeah, when the new riddle is loaded. And the best place to do that is at the bottom of load riddle. So if we do document get element by ID message inner HTML equals now it didn't clear it out. I wonder why it's not doing that. Again, all I needed to do was reload the JS bin, and it's working now. The last thing we do need to do in this issue, or we could also clear out this too. Yeah, the previous answer. And again, just to sort of drive home that you need to be real clear about the differences between inner HTML and value is document get element by ID, and then answer here, right? You would set value here to equal to 0, and that should also clear out the so if we do now, both these things should clear out. There we go. Okay, so the very last thing we need to do is, right now the way this application is working is every time I add input, the only way to actually call process input is to click the solve it button. But users are not accustomed to doing it just that way. They like not just to be able to press a button, but sometimes they just want to type in something and then hit the return key and then have it submit. So we need to be able to do that, and that requires understanding, putting in a new event into our HTML. And the event is right here on our input field. That event is called onKeyDown. So it's looking for it's looking at what you're typing into the actual keyboard. And then every time you type something in the keyboard, it calls this. It's going to call this check key function. And let's now go down and put in this check key function, or declare it function check key. And here we want to type in this, and I'll explain in a second. And I'll do a debug here. So what this is doing is every time the event is triggered, every time you hit something on the keyboard, the function is called, and then it's looking to see what key was actually pressed. In this case, we're looking for the return key, which is it's 13. Its number is 13. So if we go here and type in, A, B, C, 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 D, C, but if I press the return now, I should get an alert. And probably need to reload the page again, save snapshot, and hit the return, and now we get our alert. Okay, alert's fine, so we know that it's working, that it's listening for us hitting the return key. But of course we don't want an alert being triggered. We want to actually run the process input method. Yeah, so let's try that. And now try running it again. And I'm going to hit the enter key, and that's not working. Let's again save snapshot. Now it's working. Let's try man. So that's working now. Okay. Thanks for watching. Hope this helps you out. Again, just by way of reviewing what you learned the focus method, okay, how to make sure that the cursor is on the focus. You used the on key down event to listen to what people are entering in the keyboard. You used the event.keycode to evaluate whether it was the return key that was pressed. You used the set timeout method to delay the calling of another function. You learn to style messages with red and green text directly using JavaScript rather than writing HTML into the page with appropriate ID attributes. And you got more practice. You're going to get more practice working with the DOM here. All right, again, that's a wrap, and thanks for watching. And of course, I keep saying that we're done, but I did not actually talk about math.round. Of course, it wasn't relevant for the riddle exercise we did here because we're not working with equations. But you can research this on your own easily. Go out to W3 Schools and look up the math object, JavaScript. You can actually, here's your math object, and look up all the different methods. And the round is right here. Should show you how to use it. Math object rep methods. Well, let's just look it up this way. Round method, and you can figure out how to use it. Okay, again, that's finally, and this time I'm not lying. That's a wrap, and thanks for watching.